This conference will now be recorded.
Sadashiva-samarambham Shankaracharya-madhyamam Asmadacharya-paryantam Vande Guru-paramparam. Om Param Varishtam Brahmishtam Paramananda-rupinam Paramarthananda-yatim Sadgurum Pranatosmyaham. So, we started the Vivekachudamani classes with an introduction, and we said that there are three primary source books of knowledge, which are of the knowledge of the spiritual nature, Atma Jnanam, and those three primary sources are known as Prasthanatrayam. And we also said that there are three types or three categories. The first one is called Shruti Prasthanam. Shruti meaning the Vedas, especially the final part of the Vedas, known as Vedanta, otherwise also known as Upanishad. And then the second one is Bhagavad Gita, which is called the Smriti Prasthanam, very popular one. And it presents the sadhanas of Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga. And Bhagavad Gita, as you know, that it is part of Mahabharata, it comes under Smriti. The third one is called Nyaya Prasthanam, right? Or Brahma Sutra. It is called Nyaya Prasthanam because the support of reasoning is given to the Vedantic teaching here. So Shruti and Smriti are primarily based on the revelation of the rishis, whereas the Nyaya Prasthanam is logically defending the teaching. Seeming inconsistencies between Veda Vakyas and one Upanishad versus another Upanishad, all of these are taken and very nicely in a logical way it is defended and clarified. And of these three, for the Shruti Prasthanam, we do not know the author, I said, and therefore they are called Apaurusheya Pramanam, a source of knowledge having superhuman origin, right? So the other two Prasthanam, Smriti Prasthanam and Nyaya Prasthanam, Brahma Sutra, both have been given out by Vyasacharya. So, thus these three Prasthanams are the pillars, the foundational text, and many people do not have access to these original texts. Therefore, I also talked about Prakarana Granthas, and they deal with one or more of the 6 topics I said: Jiva, Jagat, Ishvara, Bandha, Moksha, and Sadhanani. And I also said that there are Prakarana Granthas which deal with all the 6, right, in one text, and there are other specialized Prakarana Granthas which deal with only one of them. They do a deep dive into each of these areas, right? So I gave an example of Vivekachudamani and Tattva Bodha being one which deals with all the 6 topics, and we are going to be we are actually in Vivekachudamani. And I also told you that there are other texts like Jiva Yatra, Vakya Vritti, etc., which just go into one of the topics, or even within one of the topics, a very, very specific area. So we saw all this, and then we jumped into the text per se. And I said Vivekachudamani is a Vedantic work written by Adi Shankaracharya, fairly big work consisting of 580 verses. And Swamiji has selected 108, and we have actually completed about 17 classes or about 64 verses before we took this short break. So this is a quick recap so that we all are ready for the classes when they start. So I also said that Vivekachudamani, Chudamani means an ornament which is used on the head, the crest jewel, right? So we are using that word here for Viveka, discrimination, because it is a very important qualification required for a spiritual seeker. And I also said in the first stage, during Karma Yoga stage, we require Viveka or discrimination to discriminate between Dharma and Adharma. And subsequently in the Jnana Yoga stage, it involves Atma, Anatma, Viveka. So Karma Yoga involves Dharma, Adharma, Viveka, and Jnana Yoga refers to In Jnana Yoga, the discrimination refers to Atma Anatma Viveka. So that's the title of the book, and it is written by Adi Shankaracharya. Then we saw the Mangalacharanam, the first one, an auspicious invocation for the sake of the successful completion of this work. And in this invocatory verse, Shankaracharya offered salutations to his guru. Right? Aham pranataha asmi. I offer my namaskaras to Sadgurum Govindam, Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam, Govindam Paramanandam, Sadgurum Pranatosmyaham. So he says, Sadgurum Govindam, to my Guru Govinda Bhagavat Pada, I offer my namaskaras. So he started with the Mangalacharanam, and then the very important verse on the praise of the human birth, the human Janma itself. Durlabham trayame vaitad devanugraha hetukam manushyatvam mumukshutvam mahapurusha samshayaha. So in the following verses, that is the second and the third verse, Acharya talked about the glory of the human birth, how precious it is, how rare it is, and he also said Durlabham, which is very difficult to attain and very rarely attained, or the three factors. Manushyatvam, to be born a human being, because human birth is very, very rare and precious, because a human alone can pursue the goals of life, unlike animals, right? So, and the chances of human birth, I said, was very rare, one in some 84 lakh species. And in that human birth also, the next rare thing is mumukshutvam, the desire for moksha. So according to scriptures, a human being can have four goals, right? Artha, which is pursuit of wealth; kama, pursuit of sensory pleasures or objects of enjoyment; dharma, meaning acquisition of punya, and which are subsequently exchanged for, you know, the future janmas. And then of course the last one, the fourth one, is moksha purushartha, that is freedom from self ignorance and self misconception. So it is very, very rare that a human being is actually interested in moksha. Such a person is known as mumukshu, and this status is called mumukshutvam. So manushyatvam durlabham, mumukshutvam durlabham, and then mahapurusha samshrayah. This is the third rarest thing. So if one wants to pursue liberation, he will require a spiritual guide. Otherwise, he will be trapped like a blindfolded person who is dropped in a huge forest, right? So Mahapurusha here is the spiritual guru, a great person. The support or shelter of this Mahapurusha is even more rarer. So the guidance of a competent spiritual guide is the third rarest thing we saw. Then we moved on to Jnana Devatu Kaivalyam. Acharya pointed out that the means of liberation is self-knowledge alone. In verses 4, 5, and 6 we saw, and there is no other second path. So self-knowledge has to be attained only through self-inquiry, and the inquiry has to be conducted with the help of Guru and Shastram and not independently. So Guru and Shastram are complementary. Without one, the other will not be effective. So if Shastram is there and Guru is not there, it will not work. If Guru is there and he does not base the teaching on Shastram, then also it won't work, right? So they are complementary. And then we went on to seeing the qualifications, Adhikaritmam, verses 7 to 17. So we saw Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampattihi, and Acharya talked about Vivekaha, discrimination, right? And then Vairagyam, dispassion, right? And then of course we saw Shamadhi Shatka Sampattihi, which is actually a group of sixfold inner disciplines or wealth. Shamaha, which is thought discipline; Damaha, sense control; Uparamaha, and then Titiksha, endurance or forbearance; Uparamaha, quietude of the mind, etc. Shraddha, faith in the scriptures; and Samadhanam, concentration or focusing power. Then, of course, the fourth qualification being mumukshutvam, and Acharya defined moksha, and then he mentioned that the desire for that liberation is mumukshutvam. He defined moksha in a shastric form, ahankaradi dehantan bandhana jnana kalpitan Swaswarupava bodhena moktumicha mumukshuta, in the verse 17. Actually, so moksha is dropping the identification with the body mind sense complex, not looking upon them as my real self, because identification with the body mind sense complex converts them into shackles. So there is no physical change involved. So whoever has these four qualifications, right, that is vivekaha, viragaha, shamadhishatka sampattihi and mumukshutvam, such a person is an eligible student or adhikari. Acharya only mentions the qualifications. He doesn't elaborate on how to get the qualifications. And as I said, the answer is given in the Bhagavad Gita, and it becomes very, very important spiritual text from the standpoint for acquiring these qualifications. So, and since Acharya didn't discuss, we did discuss this very briefly, and the method prescribed in the Gita is Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga as a complementary part of Karma Yoga. So Karma Yoga is an ingenious spiritual discipline given by the Veda in the Gita, in which discipline I convert the world, the entire world, into the field of service. Once I do that, that very service will help me in attaining spiritual growth, and that will take me towards moksha, right? So, and Veda and of course Bhagavad Gita prescribes varieties of activities in the form of our service to the world. All of them help in our spiritual growth. So those spiritual exercises are called Nitya Naimittika Karmani, otherwise Niyata Karmani or Vihita Karmani. All of them will help us in our internal spiritual growth, and many such karmas are prescribed. Karma meaning exercises or activities. Some of them are physical, some of them are vocal, some of them are mental. So, Pancha Mahayajnaha is something that Swamiji regularly talks about, and that is one of the best examples or sample for Nitya Naimittika Karmani. That is because it is a very comprehensive set of fivefold spiritual exercises. They are indicated in Bhagavad Gita also, in Taittiriya Upanishad, first chapter, in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, in Purushavida Brahmanam, right? And of course, in the second chapter of Taittiriya Aranyakam, which belongs to the Krishna Yajurveda, there is a mantra itself, right? And I cited this, which talks about the Pancha Mahayajna, the 2-10-1. So in the Veda, these 5 yajnas are presented in the form of ritualistic activities, right? So in the context of our society now, we can look at these 5 infrastructures as family infrastructure, social or societal infrastructure, ecological infrastructure consisting of flora and fauna and plants and animals, and then of course the elemental infrastructure consisting of the Panchabhutas, space, air, fire, water and earth. And lastly, of course, the important Vedic cultural infrastructure consisting of both religious and spiritual aspects. So, a karma yogi should first appreciate these fivefold infrastructures and their contribution to us. Then the next step is every human being has a responsibility towards preserving these, since they tend, if we are irresponsible, then instead of improving the infrastructure, it might slowly get degraded and go away, won't be available for the future generations, right? So the service done to the family is called Pitriyajnaha. Service to the society is Manushya-yajnaha. Service to the ecological environment is Bhuta-yajnaha. Service to the fivefold elements and of course in the form of gods is Deva-yajnaha. Service to our culture, the Rishi Parampara, the Vedas, etc. are Brahma-yajnaha. Thus Pitri-yajna, Manushya-yajna, Bhuta-yajna, Deva-yajna and Brahma-yajna are the fivefold yajnas, and everyone, especially every spiritual seeker, should follow them to the best of his or her own capacity, right? So this is seva. Basically, it is, if it is reverentially done, it is called an yajna. So for developing this reverential attitude, we have included Upasana Yoga as a sadhana. And in Upasana Yoga, I meditate upon God as a giver of this fivefold infrastructure. So Upasana Yoga helps me develop reverence to all the infrastructure. So Vishwarupa Upasana is very elaborately discussed in Bhagavad Gita in the chapters 7 to 12. And this helps me develop this reverential attitude, right? So Both these are very, very important, Upasana Yoga and Karma Yoga, and they complement each other and help us in gaining internal growth in the form of Viveka, Vairagya, Shatka Sampatti, and Mumukshutva. And in Upasana Yoga, I meditate upon God as either a particular deity or as a Vishwarupa Ishvara, the universal God. And for practicing Upasana, I have to learn to withdraw my senses, which is Shama, and mind, Dhamma, from the external world. And I should make my mind calm and quiet to focus on Ishvara. Therefore, in Upasana Yoga, I develop all these abilities, right? Shamaha, Damaha, Samadhanam, right? And this is what Acharya calls as Samadhi Yoga. The first 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita dwell on Karma Yoga, the next 6 on Upasana Yoga, and the last 6 on Jnana Yoga. Thus, Bhagavad Gita helps in developing the fourfold qualifications, Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti, the 4 Ds through Karma and Upasana. Now, Acharya here assumes that we have gone through Karma Yoga and Upasana Yoga and have developed reasonable sadhana chatushtaya sampatti. And now Shankaracharya said such an eligible student should enter Jnana Yoga. So that is how he approaches, right? And then he says, Guru Upasadanam, that is this portion from verses 18 to 25 talks about approaching the Guru. So in all the Vedantic works, if you see, 2 things are highlighted in the beginning. The first is that the spiritual seeker invariably approaches a guru, that is called Upasadanam. And second is the seeker knows what to ask from the guru. Always he says, hey Guru, please teach me this, right? And normally the word used is adhihi, adhihi bhagavaha, right? So they always use this word adhihi. In Bhrigu of Taittiriya Upanishad also we see, in Kaivalya Upanishad we see, in Chandogya Upanishad we see, always this teaching program is asked for by the student, right? Politely after doing all the service. Thus in all these texts, Shishya asked, teach me, and it was then followed by the Guru himself, right? Teaching, and he transferred the knowledge to the disciple. And the Guru's grace is always in the form of transference of the teaching and not, some Nayana Diksha, seeing with the eye or touching on the body or anything. No, it is pure transference of knowledge through a systematic teaching program, right? So Guru's teaching then becomes the pramanam, and that alone can generate knowledge in the mind of the student. And once teaching comes to the center stage, then the fourfold requirements become important. The student should also have good listening skills, right? So the 100% of mind should be available for the teaching, so that samadhanam, the focusing ability, etc., become very, very important. So the guru has to have twofold skills or qualification. Primarily, knowledge must be there. Secondly, the communication skill is also important. So this is highlighted by the word Shrotriyaha in verse 18. Shrotriyo vrijino kama hatoyo brahma vittamaha. Thus the term brahma vittamaha indicates the knowledge, and Shrotriyaha indicates communication skills. Both of them are important. And one thing that Swamiji always says is, some people know that Brahman, but they do not know how to teach. Some people know how to teach, but they do not know what Brahman is. The ideal teacher is one who knows both, right? Both qualifications are important, right? But if a Shrotriya Brahmanishta is not available, at least go to a Shrotriya who knows how to teach Vedanta. Because even though he may not have assimilated the teaching, at least, he can communicate well, right? So it is very important. Don't go to a mystic, is the point that is communicated. So the dialogue continues in verses 18 to 25. In verse 21, right, he says, "O teacher, please protect me, because I am so frightened of death and I'm seeking refuge, and I'm scorched by the forest fire of samsara, and I'm repeatedly tossed about by my own winds of the papa karma. So, and I see no refuge." Right? And then in the 23rd verse, Acharya says, do not be afraid of samsara, right? And I will show you the way by which people have put forth right effort and have gone to the other shore of the ocean of samsara. And then what happens is, this ends with basically the questions start thereafter, and what the seven questions, the famous 7 questions, what triggers the question is there in verse 24. Ajnana yogat paramatmanastava hyanatma bandhas tataeva samsritihi tayor vivekodita bodha vannihi ajnana karyam pradahet samulam. So in this very profound verse, very important shloka, the teacher is diagnosing the problem and referring to the samsarasya karanam, cause of samsara, in a very, very cryptic manner. So he talks about the solution which he proposes, right? So samsarasya karanam is there in the first line, and samsara nivritti upayaha is there in the second line, right? So this is indeed the bondage with anatma for you, he says, right? So what happens is this bandhaha, mokshaha, right? Bodhaha, vivekaha, all of this raises several questions. So then the students' question follows, verse 25. Ko nama bandhaha katamesha agatah katam pratisthasya katam vimokshah kosavanatma paramah ka atma tayor vivekah katametad uchyatam. Now, this is where the student raises the 7 questions, and for several weeks thereafter we have been seeing the response to each of the questions, right? So we saw all these questions. Kaha nama bandhaha katamesha agatah katam asya pratishta katam vimokshah kaha asau anatma paramaha atma kaha tayoho vivekah katam. So we saw this. So first he introduces the answer to the 7th question, Atma Anatma Vivekah Katam. To discriminate, demarcate the Atma and Anatma, how to discriminate. And then to answer the 7th question required the definition of Atma and Anatma. Therefore, we had to answer the 5th and 6th question. So Acharya started with the 5th one, what is Anatma? And 6th is Atma, right? So Anatma is presented here as 3 layers of the body. We saw that. We saw Sthula Shariram, Sukshma Shariram, Karana Shariram. So the gross body was defined, right? And he talked about the twofold causes of the gross body. One is a general cause, which is common to all physical or gross bodies, which is basically, it is made up of Panchabhutam, right? So that is the first one. That is the general cause. Then he also referred to a Vishesha Karanam, the karma specific to the individual, which is the Prarabdha karma, right? And so there is a Samanya Karanam, which is the Panchabhutani, the 5 gross elements, and from Maya, the 5 subtle elements are created. There's a process of Panchikaranam, all of that, right? And then we saw how the Sthula Shariram is made up of this. And of course, the Vishesha Karanam, which is nothing but the Prarabdha karma, which determines the actual body and what all experiences he goes through. So that is the Sthula Shariram part. Then we saw the Sukshma Shariram comprising of Pancha Jnanendriyani, Karmendriyani, Pancha Prana, Manaha, Buddhi, all of that. And then we also entered into the causal body, Karana Shariram, the finest layer of our personality. And Acharya talked about the seed of the entire universe, which existed even before the creation of the universe. And he named the seed Avyaktam. And in that Avyaktam, there are 2 things. One is responsible for creation of the macro universe, which is called Karana Prapancha, the seed of the cosmos. And the seed also contained all our Sthula Sukshma Sharirams in the form of Karana Shariram. Thus, Karana Prapancha and Karana Shariram always go together, right? And we can differentiate them only after creation. So that is why the mixture was given a title Avyaktam, right? And the Karana Prapancha is also called Maya. So the Karana Prapancha is also called Avidya, and they're often used interchangeably. And it's also called Shakti because of the potential, right? So the unmanifest Maya was also explained in the form of the 3 gunas, Trigunatmika, right? And so this was the Kaha Asau Anatma's response that we saw. Then we also saw the answer to Paramaha ka Atma, right? And there we saw that the ignorant person basically includes all the limitations of the body, right? And refers to that as I, while a wise person excludes them, and the ignorant says I am mortal. That means I meaning Jivatma, but a wise person learns to say I am immortal, and the word I here refers to the Paramatma. It is not only a difference in perception, right? And it is basically a difference in perception, and it is basically the same Atma which is being looked upon in two different ways. So it was also a very abstract subject, but very, very important. And it's a central theme of all Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita's, Brahma Sutra, and Vivekachudamani also. So Paramatma is a very important topic. Paramaha Atma Kaha, right? And we saw this very, very important verse, Prakriti Vikriti Bhinna Shuddha Bodha Swabhavaha. So the main sentence here is Paramatma Vilasati. So Paramatma is all the time evident, right? Anatma is evident now and then, right? But Paramatma is all the time evident, and we saw in detail, right, about Paramatma, how the Paramatma I is illumining all the three states of experiences, right? And it is Nirvikaraha. It doesn't undergo any change, right? And it's always there, ever evident. And without any effort, the Atma is evident. And that Atma is called Jivatma by the ignorant person, and that Atma is called Paramatma by the Shastra. Therefore, Acharya says this consciousness principle, which is really Paramatma, Vilasati, means shines, right? So, Pratibodha Viditam, Paramatma Vilasati. And how to see the Paramatma? Should I meditate? Should I go to Nirvikalpaka Samadhi? No. No special occasion is required. Aham aham iti sakshat sakshi rupena buddhehe. So always evident as I am, I am, I am, in the form of I am, right? As self-awareness, it is always evident. Then we saw the third question, ko nama bandhaha. So the bondage definition, once you understand the topics of anatma and atma, we know what that bondage is. Basically associating oneself with the anatma, that is bondage, right? So this body mind sense complex, this threefold body, which is anatma, right? When I don't treat it as a costume, Sthula Shariram is actually a costume, and I am behind that costume in the form of consciousness. So I am the eternal and all pervading, which is my nature. Instead of claiming this as a costume, I claim this as I am the material body. This identification with the body is bondage. So Deha Abhimanaha is called bondage. It is a clean intellectual problem, right? Concluding incorrectly that I am the body. It's not a physical bondage. It's a pure intellectual conclusion. It's a self-misconception, mistaking the temporary anatma as my real self. My essential nature is Atma. So this Dehabhimana is bondage, and it makes me a Jivatma Ahankara. Then we saw Katamesha Agataha. How does this bondage arise? Right? So, how has the human bondage come into existence? We saw that there are three Sharirams, and the longest lasting body is Karana Shariram. So this Karana Shariram, also known as Shakti, Avyaktam, Maya, Avidya, etc., right, is holding the Sanchita Karma. So every individual has got Avidya as the Karana Shariram, which is Avidya, which is called Mula Vidya, because it is the fundamental personality of the Jiva. So we saw that this avidya has got avarana shakti and vikshepa shakti, of which at the macro level we saw vikshepa shakti is responsible for the creation of the universe. But at the macro level, we do not talk about avarana shakti because Bhagavan doesn't have self-ignorance, or avarana shakti doesn't function in the case of Bhagavan. Now, when you come down to the individual living being, we have to talk about the function of both Vikshepa Shakti and Avarana Shakti. So, Avarana Shakti is functional in the individual Karana Shariram. Therefore, it becomes active, and because of that, the individual does not know his real nature. So, the Avarana Shakti expresses itself as self-ignorance, concealing my real nature, Atma. And once Avarana Shakti covers my real nature, Vikshepa Shakti takes over. So ignorance leads to false conclusions or mistakes, and this mistake is caused by Vikshepa Shakti. All other consequences are caused by Vikshepa Shakti. Thus, Avarana Shakti and Vikshepa Shakti belonging to the Karana Shariram or Avidya becomes the cause for bondage, and these two forces operate at the individual level. So, of these two, in Bhagavan, as I said, one Shakti doesn't operate, and that is the Avarana Shakti. Whereas in the case of the human being, the Avarana Shakti, which is connected to Tamoguna, Vikshepa Shakti is connected to Rajoguna. Thus, Tamoguna and Rajoguna conspire and push the human being into the ditch of samsara. But luckily, Sattva Guna is present and it is an escape route. So, this Sattva Guna is going to be the saving grace, which alone has to ultimately lead to self-knowledge and liberate me from self-ignorance and self-misconception. Then, Katam Pratishtasya, how is bondage established? Right? So, how does this samsara persist in the life of a jiva? Right? So how does it sustain itself for such a long time? The question arises because samsara is anadi, right? Which means it has survived for several creations, right? Srishti, Sthiti, Laya, etc. How is it managing to continue? I've gone through infinite number of bodies, insect bodies, animal bodies, plant bodies, etc. How does it manage to continue? Right? So we saw this very important verse, Bijam Samskriti Bhumijasya tu tamo. So here a comparison is made, right, with a tree. The jiva's life to a vriksha or a tree is compared, and exactly not as in the Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita, slightly different it is covered, and it is said that every jiva is exactly like that, right? The tree is a living series. The seed grows into a plant and then into a tree, etc. So every jiva survives and is born again. Thus a tree comparison is made, and in this comparison 10 common factors or features are talked about, and between the tree and samsara, and that is what we actually saw in this very involved shloka. I'm not going through the details, just to remind you that we made this comparison with a tree, right? So it is the series that is a cause, that is maintaining the cause. Then katam vimokshaha, how is liberation attained? So the question can be, this very question itself can be asked only by a human being, because the animal is also a jiva, but the animal cannot ask this question. It has to wait for a human janma. So in the past, the animal may have had human janma. The humans also may have had any form of janma. We must remember that. So how can I become immortal? So it gives a lifestyle which is designed for moksha, and that is condensed. It was condensed in a very neat Piti Shloka, extremely important verse. And we saw how this whole thing works, the Karma Yoga part and the Jnana Yoga part. We saw this even today during the recap. So through Karma Yoga, through Upasana Yoga, Sadgunaha and Nishkama Bhakti, right? So Nishkama Bhakti means praying actually for Jnana Vairagya Siddhartham and Moksha, rather than for anything which is particular for one's own self or family, right? So we saw this in this verse, Shruti Pramane Kamatehe Swadharmanishta. So through Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, we attack. Jnana Yoga is the one that actually attacks the intellectual problems of self-ignorance and misconception. And once they are gone, samsara nashaha, samsara will go away, samulam, along with the root called self-ignorance, which is an intellectual problem. Then we came to the very important verse on the verses related to Tayor Vivekaha Katham, right? And we covered this in the last 4 classes, 14, 15, 16, and 17 classes. So it was answered by the Guru. The question being Atma Anatma Vivekaha Katham. So Pancha Kosha Vivekaha, which is the way to this, Katham. So by Atma and Atma Viveka, the three bodies should be understood as three bodies. And the methodology that was used was Pancha Kosha Vivekaha, right? And so instead of taking the three sharirams for analysis, the very same three sharirams were subdivided into 5 koshas, and each kosha or layer or costume was taken up. So the definition of each kosha was given, and so the actually Acharya shows how each one of the koshas is not an Atma. So the argument used was twofold. One is showing that each kosha is like the external anatma, that the world is anatma is never debated. So it is only the koshas whether they will come under atma or anatma category. And then he showed that each kosha is also an anatma because we are experiencing that kosha, and I am not that anatma, right? So for showing this, he took the external world of objects and bahya anatma salakshanaha. So having features common to the external world of objects, right? He used that logic to negate each kosha. And not only that, Atma has been described in the Upanishad. So when you look at the features of Atma, right? So Sarvagatam, Adrishyam, Agrahyam, etc. The features he showed, he compared and contrasted and said the kosha features are like the external anatma, which is called anatma salakshana. The features are unlike the description of atma described in Upanishad. So atma vilakshanaha. So he showed that the anatma is like the external object. He also showed that atma is not like anatma is not like atma. So both he used. Thus, anatma salakshanatvam is there, atma vilakshanatvam is there. So, kosha is like the external world, it is unlike the atma. Therefore, kosha should be studied or looked upon as part of the external world. So, pancha kosha vivekaha, methodically he went from annamaya kosha all the way up to anandamaya kosha. And then he said, Atma is not all of this. And thus, all the 7 questions were answered. That was completed in the verse 60. And as I said in the last class, so we might wonder what else is left, right, in 61 onwards, the rest of the classes, right? So the extension is basically Mahavakya Vichara, which is actually an answer, a continuation of the answer to the 7th question. And it has got, as I said, 3 stages. The first stage is arriving at the real meaning of the word I, understanding the revised I. After Panchakosha Viveka, we should know that there are 2 I's. One is the common I, which includes the body, mind, sense complex. And after Panchakosha Viveka, the revised I, which doesn't include the body, mind, sense complex, right? So that is the first part. So I told you Ahampada Vachyartha and Ahampada Lakshyartha. So the purified I is Lakshyartha. So understanding that. So the first level of extended teaching is understanding the real I or Lakshyartha, the revised I as pure consciousness. And this pure consciousness is the real nature of not only me, but every living being, every human being. So that essential nature, the real nature is pure consciousness. So in 63 and 64, we saw that. So this part of it, we completed, the first part of the understanding. So extension of the answer to the 7th question, the first part, which is understanding the Lakshyartha, right? Now, going forward, we are going to see from verses 66 to 73, we are going to be seeing what is the essential nature of the universe or the macro. So the samashti level vichara is going to happen. What is the truth of the cosmos, the essential nature of the cosmos, the macro, Brahman, we are going to see. So first part, which we have covered, which is Atma is the essence of every individual. Then Brahman is the universal self, that we are going to see. And the third level, we will say that the universal self, the essence of macro, and the individual self, the essence of micro, both are one individual principle. So that is what we are going to say, which is Atma and Brahman. The first level is referred to as Atma, the second level is Brahman. The third level is basically Atma Brahma Aikyam. And in the Upanishad, there are several statements which give the Aikyam. And these statements are called Mahavakyam, and there are several Mahavakyams. And of course, we are going to see this in the coming classes, which we will take up in the next class. Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.